Okay, we're going to go over autoimmune conditions, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's syndrome, lupus, multiple chemical sensitivity, idiopathic thrombocytopenia, where your platelets are getting destroyed, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, multiple mixed connective tissue disorder. So many abbreviations here. Raynaud's disease, and I don't know if I missed any there, but basically any autoimmune condition, there is hope. And I'm going to show you how we look at these things in a very different light than what you're traditionally used to. So an autoimmune disease is when the immune system is attacking itself. Immune system attack of self-tissues. And just some statistics, it affects approximately 1 in 5 people. In medical diagnosis, the attention is primarily placed on the damaged tissues or glands. So if you have a Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the attention is placed on the thyroid gland. And I believe, and there are many people who think the way that I think in functional medicine versus traditional medicine. I think our attention should be focused on the immune system. It's an immune system disorder. The immune system is the system or the organ behaving improperly, so let's pay our dues to that. Let's pay attention to what the immune system is doing. So how can we shift the immune system toward improved function? Looking at the process, considering all the systems that contribute to how the immune system is functioning. For instance, the adrenal hormones. If we get stressed out and the stress becomes chronic and the chronic stress becomes a hormonal change, that has an impact on your immune system. So we need to look at all those systems, and we need to trust the adaptations. We need to look at, what that means is if the immune system is attacking some of your tissue, trusting is that process is in place for a reason. And we need to ask why a perfect system is responding and treating itself in such a destructive fashion. And we need to move forward in faith, which means when we find the imbalances that are causing this destructive process, we can have faith that if we can correct those imbalances, your health is going to return. So let's just look at a healthy immune response. In a normal immune response, an antigen invades. An antigen is anything designated by the immune system as foreign, which could be infection, bacteria, viral, chemicals such as heavy metals, pesticides, things like that, or it could be an allergen. The most famous probably being gluten intolerance or wheat intolerance in celiac disease. But there's an immune sensitivity to those foods. When an antigen reaches the bloodstream, a macrophage bumps into it and eats it, basically. While it's processing that foreign substance, it radios for help via what is called the Th1 cytokines. These are hormone-like substances that call into action a certain group of cells, namely the cytotoxic T cells and the natural killer cells. And that's what these are down here, T and natural killer cells. So those are who come to clean up the mess. If the T cells fail to vanquish the antigen, perhaps it's a virus, and virus being so tiny that they get into cells and they are not able to be found easily by the cytotoxic T cells. A further radioing for help to the B cells via the Th2 cytokines. And these, again, are just hormone-like substances that communicate cell to cell in our body to initiate a new response. So the B cells come out, and what they do is they tag the infected cells for destruction. So let's say, like in hepatitis, the virus gets inside the liver cells, it tags those infected cells for destruction. And then the T cells, the natural killer cells, can recognize the antigen and further accomplish its removing of it. And when the war is won, the T suppressor cells call in the troops. And T suppressor cells are unique individual cells in the immune system that are akin to one of the secretaries of state that literally send the message to attack or to withdraw. Another very important cell in looking at the diagnosis on a deeper level. So immune dysregulation, regulation is everything is being balanced. Dysregulation is things are out of balance. So the things that we see when we get into our diagnostics are an imbalance between the T and the B cells. So T cells are really high, B cells are really low, B cells are really high, T cells are really low, or some fashion of that. We don't have a balanced immune response. We have a lack of normal suppression, which means that those T suppressor cells are being inhibited or suppressed by an even higher. So if you suppress suppression, you get activation. And activation in your immune system is good when there's a threat. But when the threat happens to be your joint tissue and rheumatoid arthritis, that suppression is something that we rather want. There could be a continuous activation, things that I mentioned before, like gluten intolerance, where somebody continues to eat wheat because they don't know that they have gluten intolerance, and they continuously activate their immune system. There's something called compromised barriers. The barrier systems of the human body are the skin. We're all familiar with that. The lung barrier, so there's a mucosal barrier in the lungs that protects our internal system from breathing in foreign elements. And there's an intestinal barrier, which prevents our internal environment from absorbing through the intestinal wall things that are foreign to that internal environment. So if the barrier is compromised, it means that the permeability is affected. It means it absorbs more things or allows more things to pass through. Then when we eat our food, undigested proteins, waste materials are absorbed into the bloodstream, and that results in an immune activation. Stress, as I mentioned already, and stress isn't just life. Stress also refers to chronic anemic states, meaning you don't have enough oxygen going to your body. That's pretty stressful for your body and your nervous system. Junk food that causes blood sugar spikes, which results in insulin spikes, which then results in low blood sugar, which then results in activation of the adrenal system, which is your stress system, to bring the blood sugar back to normal. So we'll get into that in more detail, but junk food is a stressor too. It's not just a blood sugar problem. The pancreas and the adrenals work together to maintain healthy blood sugar. Inflammation is another key stress producer. When there's inflammation in your system, your body is signaling via hormones such as cortisol that it's sick. And when you're inflamed because of a diet, because of immune activity, we constantly get those stress signals. And like I mentioned with the junk food insulin surges, insulin resistance, which means that your insulin isn't even working very well for you anymore. Its job is to get sugar inside the cell, and when we become resistant, it can't do that. And also other hormonal problems can contribute to immune dysregulation. and that's our estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And men and women have a unique ratios and balance for those specific hormones. So here is the cause of all autoimmune disorders. Now, I would guess that you've been waiting ever since that you had the diagnosis. The diagnosis comes after much suffering. Your symptoms are presenting, and finally you're told, hey, you have an autoimmune disorder, and you get a name, and never at once do they give you the cause of this whole process taking place in your body. So here it is in brief. Viral load. If we are exposed to a multitude of viruses in our life that our body is incapable or lacks the resilience to get rid of, and they continue to live in us, they stimulate the Th1 cytokines, which activates a cytotoxic T and natural killer cell activity. Molds and parasites. Parasites will often live in your intestines and you don't even know it. Molds in your environment, and many times you don't know that either. They're breathed in. They affect the lung barrier system, and eventually they stimulate the Th1 cytokines, just like I mentioned, the T cells. Stress and insulin. Chronic stress, which could be physiologic, low oxygen, inflammation. It could be emotional, social, losing your job. Anything that becomes chronic then becomes a hormone problem, and that changes your immune system, and that stimulates the Th2 side, the B cells. Dysbiosis, which is your intestinal immune system. We see the commercials on TV for Activia and things like that that have healthy bacteria. Well, if that bacterial environment gets upset, it's more than just constipation. Let's say we get something in there that is a little more pathologic. Clostridium, parasites, yeast, candida species. Your intestinal immune system is then activated. There's something called haptens, which are the inorganic chemicals, heavy metals, pesticides, environmental chemicals, which stimulate the Th2 side of the immune system. There's even more. Ongoing activation, like I mentioned, the food allergies. We'll get a little bit more into depth in the immune barrier compromise on the next slide. But all of these things result in an immune imbalance and can trigger the autoimmune process. Your genes, your parents, determine what tissues are attacked. But without any of those things happening, all the causes of autoimmune disorders, those genes won't get triggered to activate. So whether it's your brain, your thyroid, your exocrine glands, like in Sjogrens syndrome, pancreas, like in type 1 diabetes, joints, as in rheumatoid arthritis. And I believe that there are many autoimmune conditions that aren't treated as autoimmune, like dizziness a lot of times has an autoimmune component. Peripheral neuropathy, fibromyalgia, many times has an autoimmune component. Autism, I mentioned brain over here, but anything that results in a significantly or severely altered brain function, it has the potential of being an autoimmune phenomenon, and the only way you know whether it is or not, so that you can actually treat it, is to do the tests. You have to do the test to see if it is part of the process. So get the right diagnosis. We do our metabolic testing. And the number one thing that we do in autoimmune conditions is called the lymphocyte subpopulation. This is the T and B cell subpopulations. It's just how many of these guys are in there. Natural killer cell populations. And the information that gives us is, first, we look at the T helper to T suppressor ratio, and that'll tell us if there's a high helper ratio. we have an active antigen. Antigen, again, being one of those foreign things. And then we have to actually dig in and see if there are viral loads, if there are food sensitivities, if there are intestinal infections, or if there is barrier compromise. We have to find and relieve that activation of your immune system. If it is immune dysregulation, a lot of times you will see a T helper to T suppressor ratio less than 2. And then we know we just have an immune dysregulation problem. And we need to get to work on balancing the immune system. So if we do have an autoimmune condition diagnosed, we also want to take a look at the cytokine panel and see what hormones are being activated. Th1 or Th2. Cytokines are the name of these hormone-like chemicals. So those are the panels that we run along with the CBC to take a real deep look at the immune system and start the diagnostic process and understanding of why you have this condition and what we can do to restore health and get you back into a state where your immune system is being nice to the rest of your body, whatever that might be. The other messengers, and again, hormones are the messengers in our systems. They do cell-to-cell, tissue-to-tissue, organ-to-organ messages. I mentioned already the adrenal stress index and the sex hormones are very important and directly impact the immune system. We do a full thyroid panel also, which means that we do a TSH. That is the pituitary output of thyroid production. We do a T4, which is the thyroid output of your metabolism. We do a T3, which is the final conversion in the liver to result in a healthy metabolism. So metabolism also refers to the energy processing in our cells. So we have to look at how our cells are processing energy to truly return to a full state of health. We have to look at inflammation. Inflammation triggers the immune system. It signals to the brain that it's sick, and that signals to the immune system to further activate and further get imbalanced, and it just complicates the process. So we look at two big markers, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and this HCY stands for homocysteine. Both of these have impacts well beyond the immune system also. Both of these are probably the most important cardiovascular markers, and neither of these can be felt. There's no outside indication that you have high levels of these blood markers. Nothing tells you until you start to have a symptom and a disease process that's beginning. We need to do insulin sensitivity testing. Getting sugar into the cell and processing that sugar is part of creating energy. So on just a purely cellular energy and healing level, we have to know that your insulin is working for you, that your blood sugar is regulated properly. But insulin sensitivity or insensitivity, insulin resistance, is a stressor to your adrenal system too. So you're going to get a change in your cortisol output, which also directly impacts the immune system if you have insulin resistance or insulin insensitivity. And then we do your traditional labs, the CMP, that's a comprehensive metabolic profile, which is your fats, proteins, minerals, and enzymes. The enzymes are markers for general organ stress. And vitamin D. Vitamin D impacts one of the most important immune cells that we haven't mentioned so far. And it's called a T regulatory cell. And it literally, as the name implies, it regulates the number of T helper cells, which are kind of like the gas pedal for the immune system, and the T suppressor cells. So it's kind of like the office of the president. directing and coordinating its cabinets, which ultimately results in changes in the military and the CIA, and it's quite a good analogy there. So vitamin D impacts the office of the president, the T regulatory cells, so it's very important to have that marker. And then we diagnose and treat the process. Pathology, disease, destruction, even symptoms are the circumstances. What we want to achieve in our diagnosis is the road to the circumstances. We want to know how you got to the circumstances. We can do something about the road. We can do something about the adaptive shifts that occur. Many times we can't do a whole lot about the consequences, and neither can medicine. Like in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the autoimmune attack on the thyroid tissues, they just start replacing the hormone. There's no treatment of the process. There's nothing they can do to preserve the gland. There's nothing that they can do to change your immune system. You probably know that the only medical treatment for the immune system is steroids or chemotherapy, which are immune suppressive drugs. And while it's possible that immune suppression could be healthy, I guess it's possible, we wouldn't want to do that unless we did your T and B lymphocytes and we found that both sides are sky high. Both sides are overactive, and then maybe a immune suppressive, I would still prefer something that's going to slow down the immune system versus a chemotherapy medication. But anyway, point being is if you're going to suppress your immune system, you better know that your immune system is too high on both sides. As you'll see in just a few moments here, there's way more gentle, way more effective, and way healthier ways to balance and resolve these immune imbalances that result in this destructive process. And when we change these things, I really do. I expect improvement, and you can expect improvement in your symptoms, in your condition, in the destructive process. So diagnosing and treating the process a little bit deeper here. The road may include, if you're thinking road, think of the environment. It could be a chronic stress thing. So let's go through that. The consequence in chronic stress is going to be your hormones change. You actually have a hormone problem in chronic stress. That, as I mentioned, causes immune shifts as well as brain changes. So when the brain changes, our stress system actually gets worse. Adrenal hormones also cause a barrier compromise. When our intestinal mucosal membranes, the tissues that provide that barrier function, are bathed in cortisol, they're eaten up, basically. Causes joint deterioration. Stress does this. Inflammation, bone turnover, sleep problems, very tied to sleep problems. If you're having any insomnia, I would bet a small amount, maybe a big amount, that sleep problems are due at least partly to changes in your adrenal hormones. Blood sugar problems. When you have changes in your adrenal hormones, you almost always have problems with blood sugar, because cortisol brings blood sugar back up. So insulin brings it down, cortisol brings it up, eating brings it up, insulin brings it back down, cortisol brings it up. So if you get the idea, they play hand in hand on maintaining blood sugar. Over time, this also creates weight gain, and there's stress on the liver, muscle tightness. So those are all the consequences that can occur as a result of chronic stress and the changes of chronic stress. Now, we all have stress, but not everybody has adrenal hormone changes. So not everybody has it to the level that causes a hormonal consequence. And we can treat a hormonal consequence. We can actually change using specific botanicals and nutrients and methods to switch that back to so we don't have to take you out of your life and put you on a permanent vacation to treat the hormonal shifts of stress. Obviously, that's not an option in most situations, so we have to treat it like a hormonal shift. We also certainly want to look at, how you're dealing with stress and those kind of things. But the immune stressors. So the consequence of an immune stressor. You have a chronic bacterial infection in your intestines. You have an H. pylori in your stomach. You have viral load. You have a sensitivity to dairy products. The consequences of that are changes in your cytokine and immune cell production. Cytokines first. The cytokines signal to your immune cells what to change, and that in itself is a form of stress. Your immune system shifts, and really, if you want to make it simple, repair and regulation changes. So we can go back to liver and blood sugar and bone turnover and sleeping and all those things. The foods we choose could create could be part of the road. Consequences of junk, and as one of my colleagues says, there's no such thing as junk food. There's only food, which are things that help you repair and regulate, and then there's junk. So the consequences of eating junk are insulin resistance. If you spike your blood sugar enough, resulting in an insulin spike, you're going to end up with insulin resistance. That's going to cause stress. It's going to cause immune dysregulation. It's going to cause problems with repair and regulation of your entire system. So that's how consequences create a chain of events that can result in any condition or problem. So let's go through this. Now, we already covered this slide, and I want to show you in detail what this looks like. We get, these are the T helper cells right here, and that's the Th2, Th1, immune chemicals. These are all the cytokines. This is the T helper. This is the T regulatory cells. Now beyond that, we're also going to get the, out here further are the T cells and the B cells. And on this side also are the natural killer cells. So we get all these numbers, and what we want to begin the process with is if we see an imbalanced T cells, B cells, natural killer cells, helper cells to suppressor cells, imbalanced cytokines, we want to begin with working the T regulatory cells. And we do that with a substance in our office called glutathione. Glutathione is an antioxidant protein that's used largely in the liver. It's used to regulate the T regulatory cells. And as I mentioned, vitamin D also does that, and essential fatty acids, particularly the fish oils. Those all work on the T regulatory cell. And in order to pull this shifted system back into some sort of order and balance, we want to put a heavy, heavy emphasis on supporting the T regulatory cells. So that's like step one. Then we find, okay, is it more the Th1 or is it more the Th2, the B cells? So if the B cell side and the cytokines associated with B cell production are elevated, we want to stimulate the other side. And nature provides, and I can provide research on how these plants and botanicals shift your immune system, but basically The stimulants for the Th1 side are astragalus, echinacea, which are things that probably many of you, if you're into natural medicine at all, many of us have used for colds and flus. But with the cold and flu, you only get the benefit if you need stimulation of the Th1 side. So there are infections and things that echinacea doesn't work for, and you don't know that until you try it. Beta-glucan in mushrooms, maitake mushroom, glycyrrhiza from licorice, and lemon balm are all stimulants. So we may make a concoction or use one of the products that has those mixed together so that we can actually actively stimulate the Th1 side. Th2 stimulants, many people will actually say, boy, when I have coffee, I feel like garbage. I feel terrible. And that's because it's a Th2 stimulant. That's an indicator that their Th2 B cell side is actually dominating. And by drinking coffee, they're actually pushing it into a greater imbalance. And other people might say, when I have a cup of coffee, I actually feel pretty good, pretty centered, or pretty calm. Immune imbalance, of course, is stressful. So if you do something that has a little bit of an impact on or toward balancing, it's going to de-stress your body a little bit. The things we use more clinically, I don't usually say, hey, why don't you go drink 3 cups of coffee a day? Because it does have an impact on your stress system also, and could create a different problem. But we might use extracts of green tea, grapeseed, pine bark, white willow bark, lycopene from tomatoes. When that's extracted and put in therapeutic doses, it has a stimulating effect on the Th2 system. Resveratrol, which is popular from red wines, and pycnogenols. These are all plant-based nutrients that shift towards a Th2 direction, so increase your B cells. These are modulators. Modulators are things that help to center. It's not going to shift it one way or another. It's sort of like, I don't know, maybe a little bit like adaptogens. It just takes the situation and tries to make it better centered. Things that we can use here are probiotics. Vitamin A and E have big immune benefits. Colostrum, IgG proteins are great to help with the immune system, also great to help repair the intestinal barriers. Anti-inflammatory botanicals, boswellia and turmeric, and proteolytic enzymes, which are inflammation-eating enzymes, all help to modulate the immune responses. So the functional model is identify the current circumstances. That is about where traditional medicine stops with autoimmune conditions, because they don't really have anything to treat. Then we ask, how can you return to health? That's an innovative question right there. And in my book, I talk about how medicine asks, how can we manage this situation? And functional medicine says, how can we return to a state of health? We have to investigate the road to the circumstances, which means looking at the functional shifts in hormones, looking at the functional shifts in your immune system. We have to test them. Like I said on a couple of the markers, there's no indication that you have them other than testing. The only indication is a disease process. And by the time we get to a disease process, there are so many things going on that you can't make assumptions. You need to test those things so you know what you're treating, and then you treat exactly what you find. If it's high in the B cell, if it's high suppressor cell, if it's low helper cell, whatever it might be, we have to start to modulate those things, start to change them back, and we have to retest it to see if it's working. And sometimes on our first retest, we have to make some adjustments and try a little bit different, adjust the regimen a little bit, and we got a little bit too much of this and a little bit too little of that, so let's make some changes and retest. And that's the model for everything we do, is test, treat, and retest. and then expect the body to heal. Once balanced, we can have faith that the body can restore function. The damage can be repaired in most situations. I have a faith that can happen. And then, really we can bring this all into a growth process, a growth and healing process. So once survival is evident for your system, for your body and brain, you can begin a movement towards what you really desire and a passion for life. And I put this in here because to me, that's kind of motivating. You're no longer focused on this symptom, this condition. It doesn't take the energy of your life. And now you can look for connection, for passion. You can utilize the energy that you now have in abundance. And I can guarantee you that if we can stop an autoimmune process, you'll be overwhelmed with energy because it's stressful. It's crushing to your metabolism to have an autoimmune process going on in your system. So that's the basic idea of how we treat. We have to address the hormones. We have to address the immune system, all the messengers. We have to treat your body to make it healthy again. And really, with this condition or with these conditions, we have to run those immune labs so that we know what we're treating and that we can move forward and make some changes. So you have some responsibility now that you have this information, now that you know what you know from what I've just taught you. And it's your ability to respond. So your response could be to do nothing. And I'm not sure why that would be. Once given a possible solution to a struggle that you've been in for how many years, you can investigate further. And, I would respect that. That's to look into something at a deeper, level, at least shows an openness to a process. Or you could take action. And this is what I'm going to suggest to you, is an excitement about a path that you could take here. So you're going to ask questions that you've never asked. I know that these tests haven't been run. So those questions have never been answered. Treatments you've never even heard of, results that you've never even imagined. If you can feel that excitement of the possibility, that in itself can be a healing process. Although you really need to look at those labs and take care of what's going on there. So here's our contact information. And like I said, we're changing people's lives that really had no hope. Medicine gives them no hope for the conditions that we treat in our office successfully every day. It's a dead-end street for them. More and more specialists not getting any answers. In the medical model, there are no answers for these types of conditions. In the natural medicine model, we do. We have answers. We can provide solutions. We can get you back on the road to health. And I can only encourage you to do so as soon as possible. So feel free to give us a call. I look forward to meeting you and helping you close this chapter in your life and get on to a greater, more exciting, more energetic, more enjoyable life. Thank you.